Hey everyone, this is Damon here with Pixnub Software, and for this video I'm going to be showing you a good workflow for when you have green jerseys against a green screen if you're doing volume image processing. Now you're still going to have to touch those up, and I'm going to use the same techniques that I show in other videos to touch this up, but this video is really going to dive in how to speed your workflow up if you're doing a whole team or a whole league of images. Now before you just jump in and batch process, oh and by the way, we're going to batch process in two steps. We'll be doing an extraction batch and then a touch-up batch because that's going to reduce your time in front of the computer. But before you actually do that, you usually want to make an extraction on an image that represents most of the images that you're going to be batching, just so you can see what you're dealing with and get the best game plan for your extractions. Because every single batch is going to be different, and there is no step-by-step procedure to always do something exactly the same way every time. So that's why it's good just to kind of get a feel for where your images are at and know what you're going to have to do. So for this, as expected, that Chroma jersey was erased. But what I wasn't expecting, and I probably should have expected, but I didn't really think of it, is under this arm and on this ball, that's got really heavy green spill, and I believe that's coming from the jersey itself. Like this part of the ball, I'm pretty sure that's where it's coming from because this jersey was a very bright green, so it's going to act like a green screen and cast spill onto these areas. And so this is something that we may be able to fix in Easy Green Screen, and if so, it's sometimes better to do that than to try to touch that up later. So I'm going to go into the key and mask settings here, and then I'm just going to turn the foreground recovery all the way up to 100, and I can see that that has fixed the spill, or not the spill, the erased areas under the arm and on the ball. And with this foreground recovery, you only want to use it as much as you need because it can make the edges around your image kind of jagged and hard because it's really making that mask itself kind of it's got less partial transparency, I guess, if I had to explain it in some way. So in any case, that doesn't look too bad. I'm going to actually go back and just view this on the whole screen and put a color against that. Anytime you're using this foreground recovery, especially all the way up at 100, you really want to look for the edges of your image to see if they look kind of jagged or need defringed. And if there was more flyaway hair too, you'd have to be careful with this. So you may choose to not use this and just touch those areas up at the same time you're touching up the green jersey. However, since I want to show you how to use a preset, I'm going to use this for this demonstration. Edges don't look too bad, but in any case, I'm going to turn this contract mask on at 1 pixel and this feather mask up to around 0.8. Anytime I use this foreground recovery, I like to use these two. I mean, if I'm using this all the way up at 100 especially, I like to contract the mask and then feather the mask. That's going to shrink the mask by 1 pixel, and then it's going to soften the edges. So that will get rid of any of the hard edges and any fringing you may see on those edges. But I think this actually looks pretty good, so I'm just going to go back to the main menu. I want to show you one more thing too, just because I'm thinking about it. I know these videos always get kind of long because I always find little things to show you. But the reason why that arm of the ball was erased, because it looks pretty good right now. But if we turn off the spill correction, so if I uncheck this and turn this down to 0, you can see there's a dark green on the ball. And then under the arm, there's also some real dark green, which is pretty similar to the color you may get on the shadow of your green screen. That's why that's being extracted. And so by fixing this in Easy Green Screen, and then we're going to set a preset, we can automatically fix a lot of our images in batch for these areas, and so we only have to touch up the jerseys. And like I say, be careful with that foreground recovery, because depending on your images, you may just opt to fix those areas while you're fixing the jersey, especially if you have a lot of flyaway hair with girls in the batch processing. So now that we've got our presets where we want, I'm just going to click Manage Presets, enter a name, hit Save, and usually you can just use the Auto Spill Correction Opacity. And now we've got a preset in here. And that preset, by the way, if we applied it now, it's going to just apply all of those settings that we saved. So if you're doing just regular extractions and you have presets set, you don't have to go through the whole process of making those changes. But for the case of this video, I'm just going to hit Exit because we're going to be applying that preset in batch. Okay, so now the next part of this process is to batch process the extractions. So I'm going to just run the Easy Green Screen Batch. I've already got the folder selected because I did a trial run of this beforehand. Now for the save format, for this process, I'm going to save as PSD with all layers. And the reason why is because we're not going to be pausing during the batch to touch anything up. We're going to let the batch run, and then we're going to run another batch that has the layered PSD where we can make the touch-ups. So the extract mode, we're in single mask. I'm going to apply that preset that we just made, and that's going to apply that foreground recovery setting along with the feather mask and the contract mask, just as we had set it. And then also I'll point out too, if you're running dual mask or anything, the drop down for the presets is individual for single mask or dual mask. They've each got their own presets. So just be aware of that. Okay, so I'm just going to hit run. And so now you can just walk away and let it batch process the entire team or league. I'm only doing 2 images just to make this demonstration quick. But, I mean, there's no limit to how many you can do. So now in this case, it was 6 seconds an image. But on yours, if you have larger images or your computer's not quite as fast as mine, that could be 15 or 20 seconds. And that way you can walk away and you don't have to wait those 15 or 20 seconds between images to make touch-ups. Alright, so now we've got the batch process completed with multi-layer PSD images. So the next thing is we're going to be doing a batch process to recover those jerseys. And the best way to do this is with the free extension. It's the Workflow Helper panel. And once you open this up, oh, by the way, this is a free extension at pixnub.com, and it also is included in the sports key and in the master key installers. But once you open this up, very important, make sure you dock it in its own section in the Photoshop workspace, because if it's just hanging out here, it'll get closed eventually during your batching, and it's going to abort the batch and you're going to have to start over. So you don't want that happening, so you want to put it in its own section in the workspace in Photoshop, and that's going to prevent it from accidentally getting shut down. Watch the whole Workflow Helper video. I explain all that in a lot more detail. But for this, we're just going to move on. I'm going to select the source folder, and the source folder for this is the Easy Green Screen Batch folder. This contains the PSDs that were from the extraction batch. I'm just going to choose to save in the same folder. Save type, going to save as TIFF. I'm just going to hit Start Batch. So what's great about this is we don't have to wait for each image to extract. They're already extracted and we've got our layers set here. So they just open up, ready to touch up. So now I've got the Easy Green Screen panel open in its own panel. 2, I didn't mention this before, but make sure you don't put those side by side in the same panel, because if you're going back and forth between them, you're going to reset the Workflow Helper panel, because Photoshop resets this if you have another tab that you switch to in the same group. So it's got to be on its own. In any case, so to fix this in Easy Green Screen here, we're going to hit the Add Manual Recovery layer. That's going to do a few things. It first adds this layer here with a mask, so by default nothing is being recovered because the mask is black. But it also sets our brush color to white, it selects the brush for us, and it runs select subject to make an outline of the person. Now select subject, and in particular between elbows and jerseys, it's not always incredibly accurate. So what you can do is grab a magic wand tool, and then let's view this original layer so we see what we're working with. But I'm going to use the Alt key to minus on the magic wand, and also make sure you're select to contiguous mode, and tolerance around 15 or so is usually pretty good for this. If I just click in there with the minus on the magic wand, it deselects that area. So now you see we've got a pretty good selection. And so I'm going to uncheck this original, go click back on that mask, and grab our brush again. Now, if you didn't need to reselect anything, you'd already be ready to go, but since I went back there, I had to reselect my brush and go back into the layer mask. In any case, what's cool about this selection is you can use a pretty large brush. Just make sure you're not brushing over the areas of the skin, but if you brush outside the lines here, you see that it's not actually going to paint outside the lines, and that's because the selection is protecting us from painting outside of those lines. So once you're happy with that, just hit merge all so you've got a single layer. Hit save and continue. It saves it off as the TIFF and it opens your next image. And again, this is the huge time saving process because during that first easy green screen batch, you walked away. You went fishing or golfing or something while that happened, and you came back and now your images are already extracted, so you're not sitting there waiting for each extraction to get to this point. So again, we're going to run the Add Manual Recovery layer. And again, I'll need to go into this, use the magic wand, and fix that selection in both of these spots actually. The select subject tool in Photoshop just is not very good between the elbows and the jersey. That's just the way it is, and that's what this recovery layer sequence uses. But it usually gets you a good starting point. And so now, there's one thing in this one that's cool because I can show you something here. The foreground recovery did not quite recover all of this. Oops, I just moved the selection, so I'm going to hit Control Z there. Okay, so the foreground recovery wasn't quite good enough for this spill that was on the ball, and I think under this arm too. It's probably getting a lot of spill from this particular jersey. So if you want to recover and want to keep spill correction, click on this foreground layer instead of this layer, because this layer has got these spill correction layers above it. So if we grab the paintbrush here, and we're still protected because of that selection, we can still, you see, paint over the edges, and it's not going to paint outside those lines. But what you can see is we've got spill correction in these areas, at least to a certain extent. That ball still got a little bit of the green kickback from the jersey, but it actually looks kind of natural because you'd expect that anyway with a green jersey on a ball, even if it was not extracted from green screen. But the main part is under that arm, we're not seeing that green. So now that we've got that, we can go back into the regular manual recovery layer that's on top, and that's going to override anything below that. So you see that jersey where we painted in this layer, it's got that spill correction applied, but now if we paint right over that, be careful not to paint on the arm or the ball where you've already painted and need that spill correction. But now you can just paint, again, painting over the lines because that selection really protected us from having to be real accurate with our painting. Now I know I talked a lot, but this was, in all honesty, I could have done that in about 15 to 20 seconds, even with both of those touch-ups. Maybe 30 on this image, but most images will stay within that 15 to 20 second time frame. Now you're just going to merge all, hit save and continue. So now it's finished with that batch, and I can just show you. We've now got the workflow helper batch that contains single image extractions. Anyway, I know this video probably ran on a bit because I discussed a lot of things, but I mean, really, this is pretty fast. With that batch running in the PSD when you walk away, don't even consider that your time working. You come back, and once you get good at this, I mean, you can do most of these in under 30 seconds an image. So, in any case, thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in easy green screen, please be sure to visit our website. That is pixnub.com.